Alcibiades, the hero or the traitor? Now, part of the problem with the Peace of Nicaea, even though it did establish an official peace, was that neither side really kept the peace very well. Both sides continued to have skirmishes with each other. It wasn't a lasting peace, and especially in Athens, there was now a new generation growing up after the plague, which had a desire for war because their fathers had grown up hearing the stories of their fathers at war with Sparta. They wanted the glory of that, and they also wanted Athens to be great again, to restore it to its former greatness. Now, Nicias, who was the instigator of the peace, was obviously for keeping Athens at peace, but his rival Alcibiades was for war. And as you can see here, Alcibiades was a lot cooler looking than Nicias. Alcibiades was young, he was popular, he was of noble birth, he had amazingly good looks. I mean, just look at him. He was very charming. He was a pop star in Athens. When he refused to play the flute, all the other members of Athens, the youth of Athens, also refused to play the flute because of Alcibiades. He was also exceedingly rich. He had bought 7 different chariots, or kind of like paid for 7 different chariots to all race in the Olympics, and out of those 7, 3 of his chariots had taken prizes, which was an unheard of thing in Greece. So he was a phenomenon, a cultural phenomenon. Even Socrates, one of the first philosophers, the first and most famous philosophers, liked Alcibiades. They had fought together in the Peloponnesian War. They had shared a tent. They had fought side by side. At one point, Socrates had actually lunged in front of Alcibiades and saved his life. And he was committed to saving Alcibiades' life in another way, of making him, of not allowing him to become corrupted by all of the power that he had, by his good looks and his money and his popularity. But Socrates was not able to do this. Ultimately, Alcibiades was more affected by his friends and his popularity than by philosophy. And he became a very luxurious individual. He began to wear long flowing robes, purple robes that were like a woman's. He had a soft bed on his ship where he could sleep at night. And he was just living kind of a life of indulgence, which for the Athenians was not the point. If you remember, the Athenians were civilized without being comfortable. They kind of rejected a life of luxuriance and comfort. That was what the Persians were into, not the Athenians. But people kept making excuses for him and kind of excusing his behavior. Then in 415, an opportunity for glory arrived for Alcibiades. One of the Greek cities in Sicily requested help from Athens to free itself from being pressured by Syracuse. Syracuse was a city in southern Italy who was trying to take them over, and Alcibiades saw this as an opportunity. We could take over parts of Sicily and southern Italy, and thereby also take over the Carthaginians, ultimately who are connected with them, and then basically we're en route to not only control all of the Delian League, but all the rest of Greece as well. And Alcibiades got everybody, especially the young Athenians, excited about this. All of his popular followers were excited to go to war. And there's something about youth that loves the idea of war. The glory of it, the pomp, the circumstance, the beautiful armor that you get to wear, all the fanfare, the opportunity to win glory in battle. Now, Nicias saw that he was just doing this for his own glory and not really for the benefit of Athens, but more for that he would be able to win glory. And he tried to convince them that even if they were able to take Sicily, there was no way that they were going to be able to hold it. With the Athenian Empire spread so wide in this direction, for them to expand over here into Sicily and southern Italy was going to spread them too thin. They were already spread thin to begin with. This was going to spread their forces even thinner. But the city voted against Nicias and in favor of Alcibiades, that they were going to go to war. Then one night, something happened. someone decided to deface the Hermae throughout Athens. Now, the Hermae were small stone sculptures that were kind of square, and they had faces of Hermes on either side. They were kind of marker stones and little shrines to Hermes. And somebody had gone through and disfigured them. This is not one, but had disfigured them, had broken off parts and marred the faces of these Hermae. And no one could figure out who did it. But then some medics, some of the merchants and bankers came forward along with some slaves and said that there was this group of young men that they had seen defacing other statues, not the Hermae, but some other statues. And so there was kind of a connection. Maybe it's the same group of people doing both things. And the person who was behind the group of young men disfiguring those statues, they claimed was Alcibiades. And what this began was now there was actually evidence that this was not a great leader of Athens, but was this dissolute, wild man. And they used his luxurious living, the way that he had been living, as proof that he was not true to Athens, that he was an immoral person. He had disrespected the gods. But they knew that if they attacked him while he was still in Athens, all of his friends would be there to back him up. So they decided to send the expedition off to Sicily and then to recall Alcibiades after the fact. And so this is exactly what happened. With great fanfare and this huge army, the biggest army and navy that had ever been assembled in Greece, this glorious expedition set off to go and attack Sicily, and Alcibiades with them. And then once they had arrived in Sicily, the government of Athens recalled Alcibiades, brought him back. Now, one of the big problems with this is that Alcibiades was the leader of this entire expedition. It was his genius, his motivation, and he was a brilliant tactician and commander. By taking him out of the mission, the Athenians were essentially removing the key to the success of this whole operation. Again, it was his genius that was behind the whole thing, and without him there, the entire campaign essentially fell to pieces. Now, Alcibiades and some of his friends were able to escape in Italy by landing there. They escaped actually going back to Athens. He said that he didn't trust the Athenians any more than he trusted his mother when it came to his own life. He was a guy who was suspicious of others, guarded himself closely, and so the assembly in Athens declared him to be a traitor and took all of his property and sentenced him to death. And so, where did he go? He went to Sparta. Now, we've seen this before, right? When the Athenians refused to give Themistocles the praise that he thought he deserved, he went and betrayed them to their enemies. And the same thing happened here with Alcibiades. He went to the Spartans and sought their help. And while he was there, he gave them all of the keys to the city, essentially. He told them all of the things they needed to know to break into Athens. And he was a figure who was able to change himself to fit his surroundings. When he was in Athens, he was luxurious. When he was in Sparta, he did all the things they did. He exercised, he ate the black broth, he shaved all of his hair off, totally changed himself to fit in with the Spartans. But the Spartans ultimately didn't trust him. And he, fearing for his life, fled from Sparta to Ionia, where he took up with one of the Persian satraps there. Now, satrap is basically another word, a Persian word for a governor. So he took up with one of the governors in Ionia of the Persians. And while he was there, he became very popular. And as we saw, his personality was just impossible to resist. When he was in the room, he was just dynamic, and people were drawn to him. And even though after he would leave, people would realize that he was kind of, he was too wild, he was a little too crazy, that he was maybe unwise in certain ways. When he was with them, he was a hard person to resist. And he told the Persian satrap, how do you win here in this situation? You give some help to the Athenians, some help to the Spartans, and encourage this war until both of them destroy each other, and you can march in and take over both of them. And so we see, because he was so underappreciated by his own countrymen, Pericles ultimately, or Alcibiades ultimately, became a traitor to the Greeks as a whole, selling them to the Persians.